Okay, so because this is a complicated topic, I want to start with the most basic thing: is what's the point of the AA? Like, what's it here to do? What's its end game? Like, I don't want to go up through the grades from the bottom to the top, which is kind of like how you would assume this would get presented, just because I want to really look at where it's all leading, where it's all going. Now, most of the detail here is going to focus on the work of the outer college, but I think that the work of the outer college is kind of pointless if you don't understand where it's trying to lead you, basically. One of the main points is that the AA is trying to teach people to transcend limitation. The Ipsissimus, which is the highest grade, of which little can be said, is someone who is unrestricted, has absolutely no limitations on them whatsoever, and free to act however they choose, and completely self-reliant, self-aware. All these things that the order is trying to teach you to do in the lower grades culminate in complete destruction of limitation. The second major point of the order is to evolve human beings as a species. So the idea that more of these Ipsissimuses we create, we have people who are capable of acting without limitation, and also who have sworn an oath and a duty to help the lower members of the order advance themselves to this degree and reach that same state. And to that end, the order is also trying to produce genius in human beings. Literally people who are intelligent, creative, and self-disciplined enough to manifest their ideas in real things and real actions and real events. And the other thing, which is most important of Crowley's addition to the structure, was to create a record and to make available that record of the initiate's progress from the bottom to the top of the scale. And that's particularly important. With every oath in the outer college, there's a little form that you're supposed to sign and hand over, and one of the things that it repeats in all of them is that mystery is the enemy of truth. So things are supposed to be put out there and made available so people can look at them and compare findings. The idea being, if you have intelligent, creative, self-disciplined people with a record of how they've attained their spiritual attainments, they can actually compare notes and learn from each other. When everyone keeps this secret and hides it behind a veil, everyone just makes the same mistakes as everyone else over and over. Like, people build on each other's work by learning from each other, and that's how it progresses. So technically, the three highest grades are the end point. The Ipsissimus isn't really something that's easy to describe, so I would suggest that to understand what that grade means, one would have to look at all of the exercises of all of the grades sort of together and see how they work as one thing and see them as one thing. And that's really all I can say about that. The other two high grades are characterized by the second crisis of the order, which is crossing the abyss. Crowley talks about this a lot. Liber 418 is basically where he has his most detailed encounter with that. And Crowley said there were two crises of the AA, one being the HGA experience, knowledge and conversation of one's holy guardian angel, and the other being the crossing of the abyss. And this is why he considered two of his most important writings to be the Book of the Law, which was his relations with his guardian angel, and The Vision and the Voice, which was his experience with the Enochian ethers, which took him across the abyss, which means, essentially, that one reaches a state of mind where there's no further division between one thing and another. All opposites are reconciled, all contradictions are united, and all complexes are resolved. Really, like, to go into a lot of detail about that I would suggest, reading The Vision and the Voice, obviously, because Crowley talks a lot about that experience. But basically, this isn't like a foreign idea. This isn't something that Crowley just sort of came up with on his own. The idea that all is one, that existence in duality is an illusion, that separation from each other is an illusion, is seen in many different spiritual traditions and some scientific theories. So it's not like Crowley just pulled this out of the air. The next grade down from Ipsissimus, having gone through this, is the Magus, which he considered his attainment in that grade to be sort of his fundamental purpose. Crowley talks in his Confessions about how he got the word of the law as Thelema when he had his HGA experience with Aiwass, but he didn't feel that it was just being used as a minor officer and didn't really attain to that grade until much, much later in his career. And there's stuff in the Confessions about that which is really fascinating, because he talks about how his initiation took place over, periods of 73 days, I believe it was, and talks about how really literally it was mostly his social life that was his initiation. Because when you're at grades at this level, it's not like someone stands over you and like waves a wand around, says a few words, and initiates you to the next phase. You have to go through experiences which take time, and the whole process of initiation takes a lot of time. Basically, what Crowley says, though, is when you, it's not just one person who attains the grade of Magus. Another person can, but they have to identify themselves with the word of the Aeon. And this is where I think that if you look out there about people who talk about attaining this grade, that's where a lot of people fall off the wagon and have to insist that they've got a new word, which would make the Aeon of Horus the shortest Aeon of them all, which is, I think, kind of ridiculous. And this also brings us to a second point, like, do you have to be a Thelemite to take the AA system? I personally did not identify as a Thelemite when I started practicing the AA work at the Outer College. Although Crowley does say you have to accept the Book of the Law, I was very suspicious about it. But as I continued in my practices, I started to understand why he was saying what he was saying, and why he was insisting on accepting the doctrines that he was insisting on. And I think that the cure for that kind of aversion is just experience. And I think if you actually do the work, and when we talk about the work at the Outer College, there are things that I'm sure that no one would argue would be good to increase one's own personal self-discipline and one's own intellect and one's own understanding of the universe. But to get past that grade, the Magus grade, essentially the Magus has to overcome, in all senses, duality of action, word, and thought. And this is important because we've already supposedly overcome duality by crossing the abyss. But that experience can't be fully absorbed until the full import of the other three grades is obtained, basically. And you'll find this a lot too with the second order, the Rosecross. After the aspirant has obtained knowledge and conversation of his holy guardian angel, he has to learn how to integrate that experience into magical practices and magical ideas and exactly what they're doing. And it's basically like you get a new tool, and then it takes a while to learn how to use it properly. And the Absissimist is the one who has totally mastered the crossing the abyss experience and can freely move back and forth through that. The Magus is also shown to be the master of magic, in the same way that the master of the temple is the master of mysticism. And I think that's a significant dichotomy to look at, because Crowley wanted to say that you had to master mysticism before you mastered magic. And that's really, if you go down to the work of the Outer Colleges, the least fun part of all of it, because that's the sitting still and breathing and focusing on shapes and stuff like that. Interestingly, we see the point of the order, the point of the last three orders, reflected in the probationer when he starts off. The probationer, with regard to his relationship with the order, is completely free of limitation to study and practice whatever they want to practice for a year. There's no particular guideline other than that they keep a record of the practices. So I think you can see the higher reflected in the lower in that particular respect. But in terms of the master of the temple, basically this is someone who, like I said, master of mysticism. And what we would say is that they tend their garden in a way that's described in Liber 418. They now have a certain amount of responsibility, particularly to other members of the order in the lower grades, to make sure that they're properly nourished. Crowley uses the metaphor of the garden over and over: root out the weeds, water the flowers, make sure. And I think that's a powerful image, and you can go deeply into it. And I think exposition kind of is not really necessary. It's a fairly simple image as well. When we get to the lower order, the next order, I want to go from the top, or from the bottom up this time. This is what sort of prepares the aspirant for the abyss. The Adeptus Minore is a grade that exists sort of within and without that order. Someone can have the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel, but unless they've done the correct work to advance humanity, whoever comes to them, whatever, other lower members of the order, they can't go on to the inner college and then try at Adeptus Major. Crowley kind of wanted, the AA in a way is kind of like a buddy